Okay, so hello, welcome back. So now let's move on to the next chapter of the same book. This is chapter 4 of class 1. Okay, so now what we have here is basically some model for, essentially it's you can use it as a model for subtraction. Okay, so it says that vanishing buttons. Gola Monkey wears his favorite shirt with 4 buttons. He went to so essentially the shirt had 4 buttons to begin with. He went to the garden and ate too many bananas, as he was fond of them. What do you think happened then? One of the buttons popped out and rolled away. So essentially, as he ate all of those bananas, his stomach is supposed to have popped out or gotten bigger, and so essentially the buttons on his shirt started to pop out basically. So it says one of the buttons popped out and rolled away, but he cannot dream of giving up bananas, and he keeps on losing all the buttons one by one. Okay, so over here it's in the beginning. He has he has 4 buttons on the shirt, so we have 4 buttons over here. Now what happens is that as he eats more and more bananas and the stomach gets bigger and bigger, the buttons are popping out one by one. So now essentially one button is essentially pops out, which is right over here. So essentially we had 4 buttons minus 1 button, that would be essentially 3 buttons. Again over here we had 3 buttons minus another 1 button, that would be basically 2 buttons, right? Again over here we had basically 2 buttons minus basically this 1 button over here, and well, it's I don't see it really, but anyway that doesn't matter. So we have basically 2 buttons minus 1 button, we are left with 1 button. And then the last button pops out, meaning 1 button minus 1 button, you are left with 0 buttons, right? So that's basically a very simple model that you can use basically for subtraction. So what we can write over here, essentially over here, what we can write is that we can say that essentially over here we have 4 buttons. Over here we have essentially 4 minus 1, which is equal to 3 buttons. Over here we have basically this 3, you bring it over here, 3 minus 1 is equal to 2 buttons, which is essentially this number over here. Then the 2 buttons that we had that were left over here, you can bring it over here and you can write 2 minus 1 is equal to 1 button, which is essentially this 1 button over here. And then this one you can bring it over here and write 1 minus 1 is equal to 0, which is this 0 over here. Okay, now again we have the same type of situation over here, meaning essentially it's some model for subtraction. And so it says essentially write the number of birds sitting on the branch of the tree. So we have basically 1, 2, 3 birds over here, right? Now one of them flies away, so that means that essentially we had 3 birds and one of them flies away, which means that essentially what remains is essentially 2 birds. So which means that I can write 3 minus 1 is equal to 2, right? Now the 2 birds that we had over here, one of them flies away, so what remains is basically just 1 bird. So then that means that essentially what remains is 1 bird, which means that we had 2 birds and one of them flew away, and then what remains is just 1 bird that we have over here. And the 1 bird that we had over here, she flies away, and then what remains is essentially 0 birds. So the 1 bird, if you it flies away, and then what remains is 0. So that's basically a 0 over here.